Okay, thank you very much. Very welcome to all of you this morning. I am extremely honored that I may introduce Chris Morris for this first lecture during this meeting at the European Academy of Childhood Disability in Amsterdam. I happen to know Chris for many years, and I think we first met at KenChild. And I know him as a person who is so passionate about always asking the question, how do we make a difference for people with disabilities and their families? From background, he has a completely different background. Maybe he can tell you more about it himself. But now he is the leader of the research unit PenCrew, and they are very well known for all the efforts and all the ways they involve families and people with disabilities in all the stages of research they're doing. So I'm really, truly so happy that we have you here, Chris, as the first keynote speaker at this meeting. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary-Elaine, and I'm truly honoured and flattered to be asked to present here about something that's really quite everyday for us now in our research unit, and something that I know is being practiced around the world. We had a workshop this morning to hear how families are being involved in research in Canada and the Netherlands, and I know there's colleagues here in the audience who are also involving their families in their own research in the UK and elsewhere. As you said, what's my background? Very briefly, I started out as an orthotist working with my father in London because I wasn't actually equipped to organise myself to get a job when I left school at 16. But I took an opportunity that was offered to allied health professionals in Oxford in the mid-90s when the evidence-based healthcare movement started in Oxford, and they offered master's degrees for practicing health professionals, particularly those that didn't have first degrees. And my research journey has led on from that. So I'm going to be talking about involving families in research, and particularly about identifying and prioritising research questions. And I'm very grateful to members of our family faculty that have helped me to prepare this. Funding for our research unit comes from several places, but the core funding comes from a charity called Cerebra, and they don't fund us enough to operate and do all the things we would like to do, but their core funding enables us to involve families, identify research questions, and then seek funding for specific research projects from the main government agency for research in the UK, the National Institute for Health Research. In Exeter, we also benefit from something called the Clerk for the South West Peninsula, and that's infrastructure support from the NIHR that enables patients and carers to get involved in research across health service specialities, so diabetes, dementia, and other areas, of which childhood disability is one small part. But we benefit from being part of that, and have no other potential conflicts of interest. So I moved from Oxford to Devon about 8 years ago, and this is the Southwest Peninsula, hence the peninsula part of our name, the Cerebra funding being the other one, making the Peninsula Cerebra Research Unit. And this is a delightful part of the country. It's not without areas of relative deprivation compared to other parts of the UK, but of course with all that coastline there's beautiful beaches and remote moorland to discover. PenCrew is, in effect, a partnership between researchers and research methodologists, children and families, and clinicians who look after those children and families. When we set up the unit, we had this strong mission to involve families in the research more because we felt that in the past they had been the neglected partners. However, with changes that are happening in the NHS in the UK, we're finding it perhaps more of a challenge to involve some clinicians in research, and therefore we have to be mindful of that to keep it as a partnership between the three agencies. For those unfamiliar with what involving patients and carers, in our instance families, in research means, it's about doing research with people and not merely on them, to them, about them, or for them. It doesn't mean that you don't have research participants, but it means that some element in the research governance, you're including those about whom the research is intended to inform. You're involving those people as meaningful partners in designing the research and delivering it and telling people after. And that definition comes from NIHR Involve, which is now many years established in the UK and has guided it, not least through someone called Dame Sally Davis, who as the head of the NIHR really put a commitment to putting involvement at the centre of health research in the UK. So family involvement is really crucial to everything we do. We're passionate about it. We've run for 8 years. We've had a number of researchers work with us. And no one ever really leaves Pen Crew, because we're also moved by the experience of working with the families that are part of our family faculty, and that really touches our experience. To break it up, I'm going to play you a video. When our second wave of funding from the charity came through, the local BBC came to do a video about us and interviewed Julia. So, short clip.
Plans to expand the work of a research unit in Devon will provide a lifeline for hundreds of families. The Peninsula Cerebra Research Unit, which is based at the University of Exeter Medical School, has secured funding for the next 6 years. Heidi Davey has been to meet some of the families working with the team.
It is in the book. It's on the...
Harrison and Cooper are identical twins, but lead very different lives. When the boys were born 6 years ago, life drastically changed for the Maluish family, as Harrison has cerebral palsy and is registered blind.
For a parent, when you've got a disabled child, in the first few years, your life is just about coming to terms with that disability, understanding this new world that you now live in, called the special needs world, that unless you had a relative with a disability, you just knew nothing about this parallel world that exists alongside the mainstream one.
And it was discovering the Peninsula Cerebra Research Unit that changed things for Julia and her family.
So having the opportunity to use my brain to be regarded as an expert in my parent-carer role is hugely important for my own self-esteem.
I hope that transmits some of what it means for us. Now, we set out in a paper published in Developmental Medicine and Child Neurology soon after we got going, once I'd started to understand from some of the colleagues I was working with, particularly Katrina Wyatt, who's mentored me in public involvement, about the underpinning values as to why we should be doing this. Now, there's philosophical reasons, moral arguments as to why people should be involved in activities that are designed to affect their lives and inform their decisions. But there's also pragmatic advantages. There's those of us that believe that it makes the research better if it focuses on issues that are important to those for whom the information is intended, focusing on outcomes that matter to those for whom it's trying to inform their decisions. It's also become the norm for health research in the UK. I had the word mandatory in there, but I feel that that's the wrong value to try and impart to you. It is mandatory. It's hard to escape involving patients and carers in research to obtain government funding in the UK. But I don't think that's the value I want to tell you. I want to tell you that, come on, we're all doing this. Be part of that movement. And as you heard from Julia, it can be positive and empowering for the people who are involved as partners by valuing them as experts in their own lives, much as Peter Rosenbaum's argued for family-centred research in the past, and we're building on that and moving it from clinical care into research. So one thing I learned early on was there were some challenges to involving families in research, and I, as a researcher, have responsibilities to get grants in, write grant applications, publish papers, and so we recognised early on that we needed a family involvement coordinator, somebody who wasn't necessarily a researcher and isn't a researcher in our group, although they may have masters and PhDs in geography or other fields. Their role is really to ensure that we embed family involvement in everything we do. We came up with the name of, we decided we needed a name for our family involvement group, and around 2006 I was visiting Canchard, and some of you know Diane Russell. She had a meeting with a couple of parents to design some questionnaires for a study, and she gave me a wry smile and she said, that's our family faculty. And the name just stuck, and so when we were looking for a name later, that's what we adopted. And one of the children in our family faculty designed the logo, which has stuck as well. So our family faculty is a low commitment to be part of the group that are helping us to do our research. It's really an email database of contacts, predominantly parents, and predominantly local to us, although there are some around the UK. It's a flexible commitment. We recognise that parents have busy lives, and parents of disabled children have another level of complexity to their lives, and their responsibilities and priorities can change at short notice. So we offer an opportunity to dip in and dip out of being involved with us without necessarily giving a reason. To that email database, we offer opportunities to be involved in specific projects. So if it's about a treatment for cerebral palsy, we put that in the email subject title, and that attracts the attention of those people in our family faculty who might have an interest in that topic. And we'll convene a working group. Now, some of that working group might come to a face-to-face meeting, but because they're offered in school hours, which is other people's working days, we also engage people remotely, so people can chip in by email, receive the notes of the face-to-face meeting, and be part of a working group as it progresses. We came up over time with our family faculty handbook, which is kind of trying to document how we work together. For new members, it gives an idea of the opportunities to be involved, and it describes our code of conduct for how we want to work together, and that has evolved over time as well, and benefits from how things work. But really, our code of conduct is about working respectfully together, being largely on topic for the meeting. And so perhaps now we'll hear from another member of our family faculty, Jane, about how her experience of being involved with us.
Sometimes you feel utterly powerless. All these things happen to you, happen to your child, but here you feel that you're maybe are helping decisions in the future, and that's really good. So it's not an intimidating group. We need as many people as possible, because the more people there are involved, the better and more in-depth the research will be. It feels like we're the start of trying to solve some of the puzzles, which are really big and very complex, about disability and resources and where to put money, and these are all very important to us, but hopefully actually to a wider society.
Another member of our family faculty, Mary, was involved in an activity. We have a building a partnership program. So over the year, there's things that we need to know from family faculty members, as well as things that we want people to know about research. And Mary, who's not with us at the workshop, but has helped, she produced a presentation to try and get us to talk the same language. And she used this, she has a very great way with imagery. She used the image of the maze and someone being in the maze, being guided from above. And when she described it as parents' journey and them being in the maze, being guided by the research and the research findings. But I saw it exactly the opposite way. I immediately felt like the researcher who was stuck in the maze that needed to be guided by the parents. And that's how we see it. We often refer to this research cycle, which orientates us as to where we are in the process. So it moves from the beginning, where someone has an idea that might have been based on re-evaluating something that had been done before. And from the idea, you need to define a research question, which, if it's about effectiveness of a treatment or therapy, is going to define which group of patients, what the intervention is precisely, what the comparison should be, and what the outcomes should be. there's only so much research capacity in our group in the UK, Europe or the world. So we have to at some stage decide which research we're going to focus on. So there needs to be some prioritisation, and there's a question as to who should be involved in that prioritisation, which I'll move on to in a moment. Then there's the process of planning, designing, getting the funding, which is not always straightforward, and then telling the people the results and trying to make a difference at the end. And we see this as a cyclic process, and we use the diagram at the beginning of our family faculty meetings to remind ourselves where we are at in this process. So the invitation was to focus particularly on research questions and the prioritisation of that. And so that's the stage that I'm going to focus on particularly in two ways. One of the reasons we want to focus on that stage is because, you know, in the days of evidence-based practice, it's about using research findings to inform the decisions that people make. And those decisions are largely made by the families, either people with the condition or those that look after them. So we need to know what decisions they're making and those that they would like research to inform that decision. But we equally recognise that research isn't the be-all and end-all. The values of evidence-based healthcare take into account personal preferences and clinical expertise. So it's back to that partnership and holistic approach. So one way that we do this is through our programme of what's the Evidence Summaries. So these are a series of reports that we've done over time, and they focus on questions that we're asked by families, either at meetings that we go to, there's a form on our website that people complete, or people send us an email. Now, the questions don't come in that perfect PICO effectiveness format, so there's sometimes a bit of understanding that has to go on to reframe it. And then we do what I'll own up to be quick and dirty reviews of the evidence. We go to the high-level evidence. We look at Cochrane reviews, NICE or other national guidance. We look at robust randomized controlled trials where they're available. And we provide a snapshot of that evidence insofar as we can without taking a year or more to produce the systematic review. But we do get these, before they're published, they're externally reviewed for their, the veracity, the accuracy of the information from someone who has expertise in the field. And then they're also reviewed by 2 or more members of our family faculty to check that the information is accessible, you know, that we're not using too much jargon while still explaining the information correctly. So over time, we've done quite a lot of these now, and so many that the web page just got longer and longer. So we've reorganized them by condition, and these are just drop-down accordions. And then there's an index A to Z of therapies. What they look like, and the design of them was designed in consultation with families as to what they should look like. They have a title which should be clear and unambiguous. It doesn't have to be an academic title, and it could be a headline-grabbing title. There needed to be some bullet points, a recognition that not everybody, particularly on the web, wants to read a long 2-page, 4-page summary. So there needed to be some bullet point headlines that capture what it's about and what's the bottom line that people want to know. And then there's a downloadable report that's often no more than 4 pages, which gives references and an overview. And these get more hits than anything else on our website, literally hundreds, some of them after Twitter links. So we think this is producing useful information. Karen is now going to tell us about her experience in being involved in using and then helping to revise this information.
I was asked to review the What's the Evidence Summary for selective dorsal rhizotomy for children with cerebral palsy, and this was particularly pertinent to me as my son had undergone the surgery the previous year, and it was indeed through meeting another parent at a Penn Crew meeting that I'd even become aware that this surgery existed, really. When I'd been researching the operation myself, I had read the Pencrew What's the Evidence Summary, and so I really wanted to contribute and really felt like I was giving something back. I was able to contribute on the vocabulary used, the mechanics of the surgery, and also provide an insight into the NHS commissioning through evaluation scheme, which we were indeed part of. I felt pleased to be able to contribute and felt confident that the time I spent reviewing the document was going to be helpful to the researcher and bringing a real-world perspective to their work, which will in turn hopefully help other parents and professionals researching the topic in the future.
I'm now going to shift from what Pencrew does internally to how we've had an impact and helped to contribute to some national activity in the UK about the identification and prioritisation of research questions. Now, one of my heroes is Ian Chalmers. I follow being in the research groups that he's been founded along through his career and his retirement. And this paper he wrote with Paul Glasziou was identifying avoidable waste, how research might not be benefiting society and the purpose as a whole. And I'm going to focus particularly on the first part of that. Was there might be waste in research if we're doing research that isn't addressing the questions that people need to know the answers to, both clinicians who aren't researchers and patients. And so it's about the capacity to do it. So it's about addressing those questions and those issues that are of most importance, the shared priorities. And then equally, it's about, if you're doing those studies, what are the most important outcomes in those studies? Are they the outcome? Because you might be addressing the right topic, but are you measuring the right outcomes? And there's been a growth in what are called core outcome sets for particular conditions. This was a very influential paper and led the National Institute for Health Research to have its added value in research programme, which are the pillars. These are the foundation issues that the NIHR considers when funding its research. And again, the one I'm going to focus on is questions relevant to the users of research. So this is a foundational pin for funding research in the UK. Now, back in 2004, Ian Chalmers, again, founded something called the James Lind Alliance. And these were designed to be priority setting partnerships in particular conditions or particular areas. And it was a methodology that has evolved and is still evolving for carrying out this identification and prioritization process. And as we've said, it's important to involve those people for whom the information is intended to inform. They established a process sequence of steps of engaging stakeholders and partners, identification of the questions, some checking that they weren't already known issues, so that we weren't wasting our time trying to do research on things that were already identified as being effective or ineffective. And then the prioritization process that had two stages, an interim online prioritization, then a final face-to-face workshop. And then, of course, importantly, you've got to tell people about it. So that's the basic JLA process. And we were one of the first wave, I would say, maybe certainly no more than 10th in those partnerships that have been carried out. And I took the idea, having seen a presentation about it, we took it to the British Academy of Childhood Disability and their strategic research group. And it was decided to allocate some funding from the Paul Polanyi Fund, from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, to carry out one of these projects. And it benefited early on from getting the Council for Disabled Children involved as the umbrella body for charities for disabled children in the UK, and the National Network of Parent Carer Forums, which was a way of reaching literally hundreds and thousands of parents of disabled children around the UK. They're almost like, I'd like to think of them as the union for parent carers, but they haven't affiliated yet. And we went through the processes I described earlier. We looked for partner organisations, we conducted a survey, and we sought to agree by consensus a group of top 10 priorities. Now, if you carry out this kind of survey, you need to be very clear what your scope is. The NIHR is about applied health service research. So it's about what if we do it in the next 3 or 5 years is going to make a difference. So we focus particularly on interventions. So it was about any way that we could improve the health and well-being of children with neurodisability, about which there was uncertainty, which ruled out things like cure and other aspects. But there's no reason other priority-setting partnerships have been broader. This was just how we decided to do it for ourselves. We identified a good number of charities and ways to reach out to families. And we also were very pleased that we managed to engage a significant proportion of those professional societies that were able to reach out to clinicians to take part in the survey. We went through the process. We had 475 people who submitted topics, and there were, I think, around 800 in total. Importantly, at each stage of this, what was important to us was how many were family representatives or who weren't clinicians, who weren't professionals, were contributing to that. So we were pleased that at least 40% were contributing. And that remained throughout the process, that there was always around a third to a half of the questions that made it through to the next stage came originally from parents and families. So you can see we went through the process. Now, you get a lot of questions and you've got to organise them in some way. And some of them aren't phrased as questions. So we coded them and organised them and came up with what we called indicative questions. So they didn't address exactly the issue that was named or alluded to in the survey response, but we felt that they were indicative of the topic. They had the essence of it. And in that way, for instance, questions about the right dosage of physiotherapy, speech and language therapy, or occupational therapy, how much should people have, became, we had literally dozens of people suggest that, and that came in as one question. And that was in order to make it a manageable process. We then put that to the online survey and had a reasonable spread. The numbers might not be high, but what was important to us was the spread of responses. So we were getting people from each of the stakeholder groups. And then we had a face-to-face meeting where we had 3 young adults involved, 7 parents, some charity representatives, somebody from education who was actually a wheelchair user themselves, and 8 health professionals of different flavours. We split them into 3 small groups, and they worked independently and did a ranking process. And each question was printed on a card, and we moved the cards around within the groups. And then we had a break, and then we came back and looked again within the small groups and see whether we wanted to make any changes. And then we looked at the rankings independently across the 3 groups. And then we presented those back to everybody in a plenary forum, and then we moved them around on the floor. And we had the 25 issues that we were looking at, and there were changes that were made at each stage. And then there was broadly a consensus amongst the participants. The pink things are the top 10 issues in order, where the people in the room had agreed by consensus or were so tired that they had agreed that these were the ones that we would take forward. Really instrumental in this, I can't highlight enough, was the contribution of a parent carer, Mary Busk, who we presented together in Newcastle at the EACD meeting with Mary Lane and Lawrence and Nina. And really, Mary's contribution was fantastic. And what more, she really feels proud of the work that we've did, and not least because, as I'll show you, it's had a real impact. So we then had to tell people about it. We wanted to make the difference. And so, hey, I'm an academic. I wrote a paper, got it published. I was pleased. I sent a copy to my mum. We produced one of our plain language summaries, which again, it has a headline. The headline you'll see is not the title of the academic paper. And the bullet points cover, the top 3 were about mainstream therapies, encouraging communication strategies and ways to improve children's attitudes towards disability. And then the top 10 in total include things to promote mobility, particularly for very young children, self-efficacy, mental health, continence, fitness, and sleep, all things that are really non-categorical. They're not about one condition. So if the original suggestion might have been about one condition and it could be more general, then that was the approach we took. So there it ends, and we've put the information out there. How much more can we do? Well, we were very lucky because the JLA was an independent, the James Lind Alliance was an independent organisation, but during the time that we did this work, it was adopted by the National Institute for Health Research. The other thing that happened serendipitously, by good fortune, is that the NIHR had a themed call for 1 year about research to improve the health of children with long-term conditions. And for that reason, we were very successful. The NIHR actually came looking for us and has engaged fully and is still continuing to engage. And so we've seen a significant number of the priorities that we identified have been commissioned. That is, the NIHR has said, we want research done on this because it's been identified as a priority shared by clinicians and parents and young people. The one I'm most pleased with is number 2, because NIHR didn't go asking for that. Some researchers in Manchester put together an application and actually cited it being a top 10. So it kind of worked. We'd stimulated the research community to use it as an argument to get their research funded. So we've been very pleased with that. One area that we're passionate about, and you'll see that we only managed to involve young people in the prioritisation towards the end, and then they were young adults rather than children and young people. We've, as a research unit, are quite pleased because we've become borderline competent at involving parents in our research. We've done some work. Sarah Bailey did a structured review of how people have involved young people in research from the published literature. And we did some work over a couple of years to see how we might involve young people in Pencrew's activities as a sort of children and young people's faculty. I wouldn't say that we've been massively successful in that. One activity some young people at Exeter College of Further Education did was to produce a poster for one of our projects. And we've built links with some of the schools around us, and we could go in and get young people's opinions on specific topics, and that's kind of where we're at with it. But there's huge opportunities, and we know that there's young people's groups working on other research projects around the UK. Alan Culver's got an active young people's group for his transition projects in Newcastle. So given the resources, I think there's much more that we personally could do, as well as the research community could do. You might get the idea that it's just easy. You get the families along, involve them, it's all brilliant, you know, lots of success stories. But it's not always like that. You know, there's something called the PIAF, which is the Public Involvement Impact Assessment Framework, which is used to evaluate public involvement and was developed by some people in the UK, including colleagues in Exeter. And what it gets you to think about when you look into doing an evaluation is that the involvement is actually complex and not dissimilar to how we think of complex interventions. There are ingredients that can happen, but it's how you mix them. It's what people bring. It's what the motivations and preferences and of the researchers, and also the personalities, motivation, expectations of the partners that you're involving. And it's a series of complex and ongoing interactions that one needs to be mindful of how that's operating, what impact it's having, and how it's being experienced, and how it's making a difference. And my colleague, Kristin, talks about it as an ongoing conversation. So the involvement is a two-way thing with responsibilities, and it's a two-way responsibility to keep it going. It's not just work. We do a lot of work. We take it incredibly serious at Pencrew. The research is what we come together to do, but we like to have a bit of a laugh as well. And we organise a family fun day where we're in the Southwest Peninsula where people go on holiday, so there's nice places for a family day out. So we go out, and that's a nice opportunity for us to not come together, to not talk about research, but get to know the kids and just be people and be sociable. I've not included the videos, but a couple of years ago there was, I got cream pied and then had buckets of ice cold water thrown over my head, much to everybody's entertainment. But, it's that kind of thing. And for us, it's about the lunch, having an opportunity for parents to meet before the meeting for half an hour over tea and coffee and a catch-up, having the meeting, and then a social side over lunch is incredibly important to us. And as I say, we've got this program where we're trying to build partnerships over time. What can we do to work more effectively together? And Jane, in the audience, has developed a training which was actually very therapeutic, because we came together not to talk about a research project. We came together to talk about how we work together. And it's quite a neat model that we're exploring how it works in different other groups outside of ours, about coming together to think about therapeutically about what are your motivations and understanding each other's perspectives. And I think that's a very valuable approach to take. With Julia's permission, we thought we'd show you this video.
So, Julia, thank you for coming today. We would like to know why you come to PenCrew meetings and what do you get from it, please? Sorry. All right.
It's just silliness. We're having fun. With more gravitas, as we move to a close, what we benefit from, and what any institution that wants to take this from, you need leadership at the highest level to commit to making this happen. I think otherwise it can happen, but it's incredibly hard. And we're very fortunate to have Stuart Logan.
I'm Stuart Logan. I'm the Director of the Institute of Health Research here at the University of Exeter Medical School. So the thing about me is that I'm a clinician at heart. So I like doing research because I like solving puzzles, I like thinking about stuff. But in the end, I'm only really interested if the things that we do change the outcome for patients. And it's been fantastic, particularly in the last few years, where the National Institute of Health Research has funded a kind of core for us, where we're allowed to go and work with clinicians, work with members of the public, to find out what their problems are, so that we can actually direct the research we do specifically to the things that will make a difference. And it's just been fantastic. It changes the way it feels when you do research, when you know that you're doing it with the people who are going to use the information. Perhaps the most exciting of all has been, for me personally, is that we have a large childhood disability research unit funded by a charity called Cerebra, where we have 300 plus families who have children with disabilities who guide every aspect of our research. The questions we ask, the way we ask them, the way we design the research, and the way we use the information afterwards. We can show that it's made a difference to people's lives, and for me, that's what it's all about.
There was a choice of photos from the trip. But this is Julia, Jane, Karen and Belle, who are here with us at the conference, and you're welcome to talk. They'll be happy to talk to you about their experience of being involved. And I'm incredibly grateful to them as representatives of our family faculty for making the research more enjoyable, more valuable and grounded and real. I think it really changes, as Stuart said, the way we do it. And really, we can't imagine doing research any other way now. This is us. This is what we do. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chris, for this really inspiring talk. And I open the floor for people who want to ask questions, and I'd like to invite you to go to one of the microphones that's in one of the corridors. So anyone with questions? I know it's the first talk, and it's always starting up with questions, so I can start by asking questions, but I think it's nice if the audience has questions. If not, I have a question.
Fire away.
So I was wondering, being not a clinician, being a parent, and being a scientist, primarily being a scientist. So how do you deal with the sort of the each owns agenda? So a family has an agenda, a clinician has an agenda, and scientists often have agendas as well. We have to, well, like you say, we have to publish, we have to do research, and can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that, and how you deal with those sort of, I won't call it conflict of interest, but I mean, obviously there are different interests with the different groups involved, or the persons involved.
Okay, I understand the question and the potential for a perceived conflict of interest, but I would turn it on its head and really say it's about everybody being on the same page as to why we're coming together as this partnership. Mm-hmm. And it's my responsibility as the leader of the unit, either on an ongoing basis or in a particular meeting, to make sure that those agendas are controlled. Yeah. I think it's about preparation before a meeting or before an activity, mm-hmm. that people are on board as to why they've come together, why there's signing up to the code of conduct. Like, if you want to play with us, we'll play with you, but you've got to abide by the rules, and that's largely about being respectful. So we do have clinicians who've come and worked with us and then gone away, but not reported back to us how the information was used. Mm-hmm. We've also had parents who go off topic in meetings or lose it. And we talk with some of our more experienced family faculty members how we should handle that. Should we have some kind of service agreement whereby when we're working with other people, there's, we'll do this for you, providing you do this for us. But I'd say that's there's no clear-cut answer, but I'd say it's very much about everybody coming together for the same vision, the same single purpose.
Okay, thanks.
Somebody here?
We have a question.
Thank you very much for a very nice lecture. But I have a question. The last slide was fantastic. Only 4 women, no 1 man.
Good noticing.
He's there.
Do you do research? Islamic countries, women cannot go in public. In Islamic countries, and in England you have a lot of Islamic families. Mm-hmm. Do you have a research how to help such families?
It's a fair question. Diversity is very important in public involvement generally. I would say the biggest missing group in our involvement is children and young people, because that's the essence of what we're about. We do have some male members of our family faculty and men who've come to meetings. We generally sit together in one corner. I don't know whether it's that there are more mothers who are parent carers who are more active or likely to be more active. There's certainly, because much of our work is done during the school day, during school term, that there may be fathers who are unable to come to meetings, so they would come if we did it in a different way. I think that's fair. And then there's this cultural diversity. Now, where we live in the southwest of England is the least diverse part of England. When we do national projects, there's a group called Include Me Too, which is based in the Midlands, and they are particularly focused on getting the voices of families from black and minority ethnic groups involved in having their voice heard in a range of circumstances. So I think it's a fair point. I think diversity can be layered in different ways, but so I think that's right. It's about seeing the gaps. It's hard to be. We're not doing qualitative research whereby we want everything to be, a perfect sampling regime. There's a certain pragmatism to getting it done, but we want to include the diversity where we can. So good point. We got a microphone.
We have time for one more question. Yes.
I guess Osman Ipsiroglu, Vancouver. I'm a clinician. I'm here on the right side.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. I guess what we are discussing is how to overcome communication barriers. We don't communicate in a bidirectional way, and it starts with the way we collect information. We collect the information, we have the charts, we have the electronic medical records. Basically, parents should have the chart. They should have their personal medical record. And I think as long as we don't overcome this basic, I would say, opinionated view to the problem, we will not overcome the communication barriers. I'm involved in an app project which we started in order to optimize sleep-wake behavior assessments, but it is more than an app for collecting sleep log information, more than a sleep diary. It's about enabling parents to collect the information and, like in their bank account, to share that with those whom they trust. We would love to invite you to our advisory board. Possibly we can speak later on. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, it speaks to the theme of empowerment, empowering people, and I think that's very much what we thought. Is there another question?
So maybe in the interest of time, because I think we're running out of time a little bit, leave your questions. You will be here at there it is, coffee. Thanks again, Chris, for an inspiring talk.